Big-time player. There was no turning back now. Besides, I had made a promise, and I remembered who I had made that promise to. Just let me smell it. I don't need to smoke it, I said. Big Time looked at me like my ears had just jumped off my head and started square dancing. Then he smiled, and all I saw was teeth and eyes. The Cheshire Cat spoke. You can stick your nose in it and snort it like coke for all I care, John boy. Then he paused for effect and said, I would still need too long for the kilo. Now he looked serious, and his eyes narrowed when he said, The only reason I'm here is because Lucy said you were cool, but mister, you look anything but. He was smaller than I expected, about 4 inches shorter than me and weighing maybe 160 pounds, though it was hard to tell what was under that coat. Definitely hard to tell what was under that coat. There was a calm intensity about the man who was giving me a look that would sour milk that was still in the cow. I guess the yard stare was supposed to make me piss myself. I got news for you, asshole, I thought. I was scared just driving over here. The only place I had seen this part of town was on the 6 o'clock news, usually with a little picture in the corner of the screen of someone who had been shot, stabbed, or otherwise inconvenienced. The question going through my mind now was, am I going to walk out of this in one piece, or is Mr. Cheerful here going to rob me and then shoot me as an afterthought? I had chosen not to bring a gun. If Big Time Fuller was going to rob me, I planned on giving it up without a peep. Hey, $2,000 is a lot of paper to someone like me. But suppose Mr. Fuller here was a cautious man. A gun could be trained on me right now. I make a move Big Time doesn't like, he raises a hand, and he gets $2,000 richer. And I get to be one of those little pictures on the news. What is it about white people that makes them want to drag everything out like it was some earth-shattering event? This is a simple transaction. You give me the money, I give you the reefer, and we both go home happy. If you even have the reefer, I thought. The sweat I felt running down my back had nothing to do with the weather. Could you just take it out and show it to me? I asked in a neutral tone. Big Time pulled a brown paper bag roughly the size of a loaf of pumpernickel from his trench coat like a magician. Ta-da! Did you keep that tied in there, or is there a big pocket like the game pocket in a hunting coat? I asked mildly. Fuller went back to the yard stare. Look, John boy, this is no time for jokes. Since you're obviously a cherry, let me tell you something. He had a way of enunciating his words like each one was a cigar he bit the end off of. My tax dollars at work educating the prison population so that when they got out, they could use proper grammar and be clearly understood at their next drug deal. Big Time pulled down the paper bag so I could see the dark green vacuum-packed contraband underneath. This is not clippings from my lawn, I bagged up. This is some of the best smoke on the planet. Save your jokes. There are people doing double-digit stretches for what we are doing right now. He took a step toward me. So let's do this and get out of here, he said sharply. I pulled up my shirt and took the envelope from the waist of my pants. Our eyes locked, and when Big Time saw the envelope, he acted like he expected nothing less. There. Was that so freaking hard? Contempt hung in his voice like icicles. Fuller took the envelope and shoved a brick of marijuana in my chest. Don't smoke it all in one place, he said. As a reflex, he opened the envelope and glanced in it before stuffing it in his coat pocket. Then he shook his head at me a couple of times and walked back to his car. As he drove off, I noticed the figure in the passenger seat for the first time. Maybe I should have been wondering why that was, but instead I was thinking, why does he get to make jokes and I don't? You want to hit this, sweetie? Lucy held out what was little more than a roach. I shook my head. I think I'll just concentrate on getting my eyes to focus for a while, I croaked. Too much stress and too many cigarettes always made me sound like an educated frog. She laughed and threw the roach in an ashtray. Waste not, want not. She wore a long white t-shirt. It contrasted nicely with her skin, which was the color of a cup of coffee with 2 creams in it. I was keenly aware of the fact that she wore nothing else. You did fine, sweetie, she cooed. You did fine. Yeah, I can't wait to call my folks and tell them my first drug deal was a success, I said. Lucy took one of her feet off the coffee table and gave me a playful kick. It hadn't been until I was climbing the stairs to her apartment that it hit me. It was a second-story one where everything worked half the time. Even the toilet only flushed halfway. I walked in carrying the brick of marijuana under my arm like a football and went straight for the bottle of Absolute she kept in the cupboard, not even stopping to say hello. My hands were shaking so bad, I clanked my teeth on the glass. It was like my body had realized the risk I had just taken, even if my mind had not. Lucy came up behind me and said soothing things while she rubbed my back. I threw down another double shot. "I hate vodka," I gasped. Later on, she suggested we roll a joint from the kilo, just to test it for quality. Mr. Fuller was surly, but he was no liar. "This is some strong shit," Lucy said happily. "In 2 weeks, every kid at your college will be sucking this stuff down like it was mother's milk." Lucy had suggested we buy the kilo and break it up for sale to my fellow college students at inflated prices because if they can afford to go to school, they can afford to pay good money for top-notch smoke like this. She looked at me. "Big time scare you?" "Nah," I lied. Carrying that stuff is what scared me. With a name like Big Time, I was expecting something in a larger felon. "He got his name as a middleweight boxer on the inside," she explained. "A couple of months ago, he got into a beef with 2 football player types. People who saw it said that they never even touched him. I wonder if they thought he was scary when the ambulance came to pick them up." Lucy tugged on the tongue of my belt and let her arm swing back and forth playfully. "So you see, lucky for you," she said, "size isn't everything." I decided to wait until later to feel insulted. I woke up in her little twin bed and felt her arms around me. I squeezed her hands where they were clasped at my chest. I thought back to the first time I had seen Lucy at that frat party 3 weeks ago. I was standing with a cup of beer in my hand, watching everyone trying so hard to have a good time and look cool doing it. I turned my head and saw my friend Melissa standing next to a regal young black woman. I took her in all at once and got a little dizzy. Melissa leaned in close and yelled, "This is Lucy," over the music. Lucy looked at my face searchingly and flashed a smile. "Melissa didn't tell me you were good looking," she said in my ear as she leaned in close with a hand on my shoulder. She was an attractive woman, no question about it, but what hooked me was the way she carried herself, her mannerisms, the way she didn't waste time talking if she had nothing to say. It all added up to class. She had class. Her personal style was unaffected, as if she was saying, "This is me, I'm good enough." And she was. There was all that, plus she was black. I won't deny it. I had never been with a black woman before, and I was curious. Don't get me wrong, I didn't have jungle fever or anything. It was just part of the package, like an added bonus. Our first time was a shock for me. With her manner being so reserved, the way she went after me was a surprise. She tore into me like she was a kid on Christmas morning, and I was a pile of presents. For me to say it was the best sex I ever had would be meaningless. The few women I have had weren't even in the ballpark. I stroked the back of her hands. It had been some 3 weeks. The fact that Lucy maintained such dignity while being so poor was touching. She had said she couldn't get a decent job in this town and didn't have enough money to move to try her luck in another one. Lucy was the one who came up with the idea and hatched it out to me like this. "We each put 1,000 toward a kilo of pot. You sell it to the kids you know at school." She seemed to think all college kids loved reefer. "$1,000 is every cent I have, but if we do this right, we can both triple our money." I couldn't say no to her. Besides, I hated working at the dumb coffee shop for pocket money. My parents said they would pay my tuition, but that was it. You have your savings, but even if you go through that, you'll have to go and get a job. We think it's enough for us to pay for you to go to school, so don't call us asking for money. I could see their point, even though I had decimated my savings in about 4 months. If Lucy's plan worked, we could both be living easier. She shifted in her sleep, and I drifted off to join her. "5 days later, I was walking down Wilshire Boulevard humming to myself. It was a Saturday, and I was feeling good. I had quietly let it be known that I was the man. All I had to do was carry a few joints with me and offer to smoke with one with potential customers. Hey man, where did you get this shit? Never mind where I got it, just know that I can get more, I would say with a conspiratorial look. This scene was repeated so many times I was beginning to develop quite a high tolerance level. I was also beginning to feel like a rhesus monkey in one of those experiments. We kept our stash in a hole in the wall behind the couch in Lucy's living room. There was no need to worry about the landlord finding it. Lucy said he avoided his property like the plague. I was thinking about nothing, really, as I walked toward the man in the sweatshirt who had his back to me. I should have noticed him, but all I noticed was the cigarette in his hand. I wished I had one. Right as I was ready to walk past him, I looked in the tinted windows of the car he was facing. Our eyes met in the glass, and in that instant he whirled to his left and threw an overhand right. I watched the coal of the cigarette get bigger and bigger as everything went into slow motion, including my reflexes. Big time, I thought. I came to and looked at the back of the driver's head. There were 3 men in the car with the tinted windows besides me. Fuller sat in the passenger seat. Hey, Sleeping Beauty, how's your head? The heavy-set man to my left said. I ran my fingers over the left side of my face and winced when I got to the burn. Any man who could put a cigarette out on your face and knock you senseless at the same time was definitely scary. After my initial panic subsided, I looked out my window and exhaled. I wondered if anyone had seen my abduction and reported it. It happened so fast, they might have gotten 2 digits off the license plate, I thought sourly. The 3 of them hustled me into a little office beside a restaurant. The fact that they didn't seem to care that I knew where we were made me nervous. They sat me in a chair opposite an imposing desk. My state of mind at the time made the ashtray on the desk look imposing. Fuller took his seat behind the desk and looked at me. The other 2 stood at my sides. Mr. Wright was about 6'5" with wide shoulders and an absurdly narrow waist. He looked down at me with a gaze of benign peace. Mr. Left was shorter and rounder. He looked at me like a bug he wanted to squash. I thought you college types were supposed to be smart, Big Time said. But no one who shortchanges me in my town and hangs around is smart. He took out the envelope from the other night and spilled its contents on the top of the desk. I felt nausea wash through me in waves. There was one $50 bill on top. The rest were ones. I got to say one thing. You got a sweet deal. A whole kilo of reefer for $89. A few years ago, I would have counted the money on the spot, and you would have been one sorry customer. I guess I've gotten complacent over the years. Things just have been going so well. You get in a routine. Habit is a motherfucker. Yes, it is, son. Yes, it is. He paused like a professor to let his words soak in. You see, people know me in this town. They understand that if you pull something like this on me, he raked his thumb slowly across his throat. Plus, the way you acted the other night with your let me smell it, let me see it, you had me fooled. Someone wants to con you, he can't wait to get away from you. You got me to the point where I couldn't wait to get away from you. I mean, what kind of fool would want to dance with me like that if he was ripping me off? An extremely smart or ballsy man might try it, but looking at you, I'd say you were neither. His eyes sprung wide and he reached for the phone. He put it on speaker before he punched in the number. I heard the operator's soulless voice say, "The number you have reached, 538-2536, is no longer in service." It was Lucy's number. Big Time put his hands behind his head and his feet up on the desk. The expression on his face was one of newly discovered interest. "Hey, Leon, feel like taking a drive?" he said. Mr. Left nodded understanding and said, "Sure thing, Mr. Fuller." He turned and went quietly out the door. Fuller looked at me through narrowed eyes. "Son, as it stands now, you are headed for a permanent dip in the reservoir. If I were you, I'd start talking." So I did. I told him everything I knew. It didn't take too long. I knew Lucy was a piece of work, but damn, he said when I was finished. Fuller studied me silently and then sighed. I know you trusted her. You could have at least counted the... He caught himself and smiled. People in glass houses. I remembered the way she kissed me and stuffed the envelope in my pants. I left her apartment with half a heart on, I thought ruefully. The phone rang and he pushed the button. Fuller here. I talked to a woman who lives in her building, Mr. Fuller, Leon said. She left last night. She only took a couple of suitcases. Her neighbors said she always hated living there. Said she heard her say she'd do anything to move. Thanks, Leon. Fuller looked at me with pity and took something out of the drawer that looked like a roll of gauze. Let's do some arithmetic, he said slowly as he searched for the end of the roll. There was $89 in the envelope. Subtract that from your $1,000, and that's $911 she got from you. On my end, she got me to sell her, for $89, smoke with a street value of $7,000. He pulled a long piece off the roll and produced a pair of scissors from the drawer. But I know you got the worst of the deal. She probably had a buyer lined up before she ever met you. He cut another piece off the roll that was about the same size as the first piece. Yesterday or the day before, she probably sold the whole kilo at once for $3,000 or so. He continued while wrapping his left hand. She needed a stooge to make the deal. Someone I didn't know, and more importantly, someone who didn't know me. He tucked the tape in on his right hand the same way he had just done with his left. That's what makes this so fucking hard. I know what she did to you, and I know you're not the one who took me. He stood up. But being someone like me is like being a politician or a bank president. We have reputations to protect. I can't just let you stroll out of here. He nodded to Mr. Wright, who pulled me out of the chair and held my arms behind me. If he didn't hold me, I couldn't have remained upright. My legs would have folded on me like a bad poker hand. Big-time Fuller walked around the desk and looked at me piteously. I am sorry about this, son, he said quietly and with feeling. I woke up on the sidewalk, not too far from where they had picked me up a couple of hours before. A crowd had gathered, but all I noticed was that it hurt to breathe. Broken ribs, I thought. My head felt misshapen, and my vision was coming and going. A lanky teenager looked at me and in a loud voice said, Jesus, mister, somebody worked you over good. She sure as hell did, man, I muttered, spitting blood. She sure as hell did.